All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we have a special guest on the show. This man is an industry vet with 13 years experience under his belt. He's responsible for some of the art in several award-winning video games you might have heard of. Games like Jedi Survivor, The Last of Us 2 Remastered, and the upcoming Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Today, he's here to share his story and hopefully drop some gems for the audience that have aspirations of hopefully maybe getting into game development. Mr. Del Walker, welcome to the Game and Illuminati podcast.
Damn, you make me sound important. Yeah, thank you.
You don't accidentally hold a job for 13 years. You kind of.
I think that those games that you worked on are pretty important, sir.
For sure. We appreciate you joining us. We know you're a busy man, and it's really an honor to even speak to somebody like you. I wanted to open up the conversation, and I want to just say, let the audience know a little bit about who you are, your journey, how you found your passion for art, and like how that led to the gaming industry.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think some people might make the assumption that you always knew you wanted to work in video games, or that you just make that assumption, right? It's like you had a clear goal or a clear vision. It kind of really wasn't like that. If anything, I definitely stumbled into it, where probably watching like bonus features of Star Wars bonus CD, where they're like, they show the people behind the making of, or like the old Matrix bonus DVD. I was like, okay, cool. You can actually be like a creative person or an artist and work in entertainment. Like I always heard that when you're an artist, you would just you'd never get a job that can fund your lifestyle or anything. So I was like, oh, cool. I'm actually decent at art. Like maybe I should try and pursue this. So that led me to studying, I guess, what I initially wanted to do was like concept art, like all the drawing for like movies or entertainment. Then I stumbled across like 3D applications, and then I was like, tried it, and I was like, oh, this is okay. I can do this. And then I met, I can't remember his name right now, but I met someone who worked on the Tony Hawk's titles, so like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Mm-hmm. And he was a characterized, and I was like, what does that mean? And he was just like, I make the character models that you play as in the game. And that was it. After that, I was just like, I didn't even know that even existed. I studied and then got myself in like a tiny studio after I graduated that made like SpongeBob games. That was it. SpongeBob was my claim to fame in the beginning. I was like, yes, I've made it. And
did you feel like you always had like a natural affinity to art? Like, could you naturally like draw, and then you went to school and kind of took it to the next level? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. I guess I had a natural aptitude, but I think that came from having like Jamaican parents who were like, you just had to learn patience. Like, patience was like the most important thing in the household. It's like, and that just aligns well with learning a craft like drawing. It could have been anything. It's not like, I was like born an artist. I was just like, I was quite happy to just keep doing this thing over and over again. Because my upbringing.
You got a favorite game?
Yeah. It's two. There's two games. Final Fantasy X and SSX 3.
Okay.
Okay.
And go ahead. My fault.
No, those are the two games I can play over and over again, like forever. Just forever.
And were any of those two games that they kind of inspired, they give you inspiration to even take your art to like another level? Or is there another game specifically that you played that was like, wow, I need to get into this?
No, those were the two games that like I realized how amazing it must be to make a character, and like people sit with that character for like 50 hours.
Yeah.
I was like the connection was definitely through those games where you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I got really into Devil May Cry as well and stuff like that. And it was a similar thing. But those two games I mentioned before were the first where I was like, I could make the connection with like, I enjoy this game, but a lot of my enjoyment comes through spending time with this character.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I want to give a little bit of a backstory to the audience who are not familiar with you, but how I actually became familiar with you. So when the first Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League trailer dropped, I think it was universally praised by the Black gaming community because Deadshot's hairline was extra crispy. We was like, yes, this looks like a black man. And I was streaming when the trailer dropped. And I had on stream, I was praising what Deadshot had looked like, and then I actually ended up clipping that and uploading it to social media, and it went a little viral. And I guess it ended up on your timeline, and that's how we ended up interacting with one another. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind how you were able to create such an author, because like sometimes it seems like it's like a challenge to create a authentic black man in a video game. Like what? I guess because you are black. I don't know, man. Give us the insight. Give us why were you able to make that crispy hairline?
But I think the biggest thing that like once you get in the games industry and you're at the point where you're making characters for games, you're gonna need to wait a while before anything that you have is relevant to what the needs are, because quite frankly, they ain't releasing Wu-Tang games like they used to. So you have to almost like wait for the opportunity to be like, oh, I know something you don't. And part and parcel of that is the games industry has gone a long time with a specific demographic being in charge of decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing things deliberately, but they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that would be true of if any of us were like in charge of a Bollywood game. We'd just be like, yo, we're just guessing here. We're not sure. Oh, I have a good idea. And we just might miss like integral parts that someone would be like, nah, you missed a very vital piece of my culture. So then when it came down to working on Deadshot, yeah, it was like there was a whole thing about, you know, his look, but I was able to basically completely control the conversation because thousands of hours in barbershops have given me an edge of everyone else in this conversation. So I was coming through like, you know, a scholar on this subject. You know, not just even down to like a good example is Deadshot is meant to be like in his mid to late 30s in the game. I think maybe they made it nebulous, but he's like early 40s, maybe end of his 30s. And so there was this kind of thing about like, oh yeah, we should like gray him up. And I was like, well, just so you know, like I think maybe your perception of what people who look like me look like at that age might be different from like what's in your head. Like, because, you know, Chadwick Boseman did Black Panther basically age 50.
Black don't crack, just say it, bro.
Right.
I'm like 40s, right? People be graying out at 40.
Right. And so I was like, the only way you're gonna really show his age is maybe in his voice and maybe in his beard. Like, and then you can start moving the hairline a bit, but it shouldn't be crazy. It shouldn't be crazy because he's still trying to look aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the whole thing about like the hairline, like that was a whole presentation about like, here is like how culturally we think of aspirational looks. And like, you have to think this character is a very vain character. Like Deadshot loves Deadshot. This is like, he's the opposite of Boomerang in that sense. Right? He's like extremely proud, thinks he's the best, like he's not insecure. And that's what problematic in itself, but that's going to display in your lineup. And it was very easy to say that because I could show, you know, prisoners, you know, people in the municipal jails, and they have crispy lineups because it's just part of your cultural pride. You're like, hey, I don't have my freedom, but I at least have. Right. So it made it a little bit easier to have that conversation because I had like an advantage. But I don't think anyone does weird stuff deliberately. I think they just don't really know. They didn't know that would go viral, right?
It's not malice, it's general ignorance, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
I also have a side question about this because I know this is something that we've been bringing up lately is how a lot of new black characters have been coming out and they've all had speaking of Black Panther, they've all had the Killmonger going on. Do you feel like that's a lot of it where it's like, do you feel like it's a pendulum swift where it's like, oh, now we'll do it, but now they're going like too far in one direction? You feel like there's like been you probably seen it yourself, like 5 to 6, multiple haircuts and stuff like that. Do you think that's what it is right now? It's just shifting one way to the other, it's finding that middle ground?
I think I also think it's more of that they don't know what they don't know. So they've been introduced to one cool
haircut.
And instead of saying, maybe there's more here, they've already finished. They're like, Well, I found the cool character. I found the cool
We found
haircut.
it.
Yeah,
We
that's
found
it.
the black. This is what they like here.
Right.
Killmonger, like no,
Like, and I mean, it's helpful that it's cool,
Yeah.
right? It's way better than the mid afro
Oh.
that you would get
Oh my
like
God,
on the
the
PS2
afros.
eras.
yeah,
Oh,
the
like,
afros and the
corn
general
rolls and-
corn rolls.
What you
Yeah,
got-
Right.
What you got to do is, you know how every black barbershop has that chart with like 50 different
Yeah.
haircuts. You got to bring that to the game
Right, in
development
every-
room, bro.
Just
Just show them the
see,
chart.
like
Every
it's
studio just
different
put it on the
ways
wall
to do-
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Pick
basically.
one.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
but
Um,
that's very important that you said before we move on. It's very important what you said. We've had this conversation before, and specifically when Mafia 3 came out. We spoke about how there wanted to be more black representation in video games because the black representation we were seeing before, and TBA talks about this a lot, was Coltrane in Gears of War.
Oh,
And it was like
yeah.
we're tired of having we're tired of having the stereotypical black person, right? Like and these other devs, these other game studios just don't know what black people truly are. And you brought up a good point. And I've said it before multiple times. I'm like, that we aren't making these games. If we aren't making these games, then this is what we're going to get. And, instead of directing our anger towards the studios, full of white people, then we need to make our own games. I know it's not that simple, but again, now we have a shining example in you. You'll have Ethos here, and he'll get into his story in a minute. But like we have other examples of like how when you make your own things, or you have the opportunity to influence, like you have a loud voice to influence what gets made. Whether it's a character model or the voiceover, how the actual black person acts in whatever video game that's going to come out, then that does make a difference. And then we'll start seeing better representation of ourselves.
I'm glad too you said that it wasn't like malice either. It's just genuinely they don't know. So that's actually what we wanted to bring you on the show. It's like, like you can do it if you're in the room and and you have that insight. I wanted to pivot the conversation a little bit too. Like, how did it actually make you feel to see the response from like black gamers, the way that Deadshot looked in the game? Like, how did that make you feel?
I'll be honest, I was looking for it. Like, okay, yeah, I was
Intentional.
looking for it.
All right.
Yeah, because here's the truth. If he did not have that lineup, if he had
I would get cooked.
they will come for me.
They'll get-
But the Metacritic score would stay the same.
Mhm.
Like the actual like game reception may not be impacted by that, but culturally there'd be some cooking to do for sure. Like I would get cooked because I do the same thing. Like, so I was intentionally looking for responses from black gamers because it was like, I worked on that character for many, many weeks and many months even. Like it was a long time. And it was like, I probably spent a little bit too long on certain aspects, but it was for the reception of like, oh, okay, cool. This isn't just like, oh, cool, some reviews or whatever. This is people's perception of people who look like me.
Mhm.
Like, I know of times that, all right, a perfect example is Mae Jemison. So she's the first African-American woman astronaut in the, I guess, the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
And that's like, people would be like, oh, that's amazing. And people ask what was her inspiration to go and pursue NASA. She was picked out of like, 128,000 applicants, and all of the applicants had like crazy resumes. You needed to have like insane engineering. You had like have to have 2 degrees, work in Peace Corps. It was insane just to apply. And she was chosen. And she said her inspiration for pursuing being an astronaut in NASA was Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because she saw Uhura
She saw,
in Star Trek, and it's like the media depiction of someone who is like her gave her the self-confidence to feel like, oh yeah, I can do that. And that's like, Star Trek is not in no way like biographical or like trying to represent anything that other than just aspirations. So yeah, when people are like, oh yeah, was it fun working on a black character? I was like, this is actually really important to my culture, that people see something that's like them, that's a cool depiction. Like it affects their self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
It actually affects their self-esteem. So Yeah, it was a big deal for me. I was looking for it. I was looking for that response.
First time I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, a lot of people about to cosplay him. He looks right. I gotta ask you, what's your favorite game you've worked on so far? Because we named some heavy hitters early, and why? What was the reason?
Oh, that's tough. Yeah, that's tough.
He said, "Man, I just got so much heat under my belt."
I tell you, I came up with that question. I was like, "Yeah, ask him this. This will get him."
I think the game that gave me like the most electric was SpongeBob Surf and Skate, because it was because it was the first game I made a character model and it appeared in the game, and it wasn't real until that happened. It wasn't like I was working on that on my computer. Now I can watch a YouTube of someone playing it. It was like, yeah,
how does
was
that
crazy.
I'm curious, how does that work too? Like when you're like in a studio setting, when you're making characters, is it really like, do you feel like you just get to assign like, hey, make this NPC character, or make SpongeBob or something like that, and then that's your responsibility? Or is it more like a shared where it's like, I work on this aspect of this character, then another person works on this aspect? Do you like, is it like that? Is it like collaborative, or is it more of, I take care of this is like my baby, I work on this, and
yeah, you get to talk like that when you got more than 10 years experience.
Yes.
But then it's like, it's caveated by how important is the character. So if you want the freedom of working in character models and have exactly what you said in the beginning, where you're like, yeah, this is mine, no one's really troubling me too much. I'll be like, oh, I'm going to give him a scar on his cheek. I'm feeling to like change this up.
Sure.
Then request to work on security guard number 6.
It's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be like, cool, no problem. The moment you're working on something that's going to appear in the box, it is not quite like that.
It's scrutinized heavily then everywhere.
Extremely. You know, the belt buckle on Deadshot changed like 4 times. Like, like finished it, put it in the game, and they're just like, so it's, the level of scrutiny is way higher. But for the most part, you're dealing with the concept art, which is the drawing or illustration of what you'll be making.
Yep.
And that gets heavily scrutinized. The art director's going to take a long time to get exactly what he wants. That might even have like outside people who have a say on how it goes. Like they might have the franchise holders like Warner Brothers be like, yeah, okay, we're happy with this, but we're not really sure about this part. That can kind of confuse our branding if we ever want to use that. Like it all makes sense. It's all very well thought out. But then when you're making the model, the more important the character is, the more your model has to adhere to the concept art. But you can you're just elevating it, right? You're bringing it to life, elevating it. And then there's things that you might not think of. Like, I can talk about SpongeBob all day because that studio's completely gone. So,
they got wiped out. So
that studio closed down a long time ago.
No legal obligations.
I got one for you. I'm glad you brought up it took 4 different iterations with the belt buckle on Deadshot, because now I want to ask you, I would imagine that can be a little bit deflating as an artist. Like, what do you do when you lack inspiration? How do you recenter yourself?
No, you need to come in like without an ego, or you're wasting your time. You need to come in like, there's like a whole thing about like artist personality and writer's personality, where they have to learn very quickly that most of what they make will end up in the trash. And they have to learn that quickly, because if you start associating your ego with something like
your self-worth.
Whoa,
that's deep. I know personally.
Just talking about this before we started recording. I love this.
It
gets deep.
Yeah, that's real dangerous grounds. Real dangerous grounds. Like you don't want to be in a situation like where your worth is completely linked to like what you're making. It should just be the process of making and trusting the process. So you just wouldn't be a good co-worker as well if you're like, hey, we need to change this, and they're like, oh wow, but this is my
that's bad.
This is my vision. This is my vision. Like I love that. No, it's not gonna go like the Thriller album. Quincy Jones said like a couple of years ago, there were like 80 something tracks and he just chose 10. And we're like, what? You should have never told us that.
Don't tell us
I need to hear out of 70.
Right. Yeah. But just you can be that at the level of your craft that you're just like, I'm cutting all of this to focus on the parts that are premium. You gotta have something in you.
That is amazing. Keeping it at the game development side of things, what do you feel like, because you're very active on Twitter and talking about like the gaming industry, what do you feel like is the biggest misconception about being a game developer or the process of it?
I'm not sure what the biggest misconception is, because it changes. People have asked me this question before, but it changes. But I think there is a little bit of here's one thing. I don't know what's a good faith and bad faith question. Like online, you have to have very, very thick skin, especially me, like, because I'm black. So I'm getting N-word in my DMs every single day, basically.
For real?
By invisible. Yeah.
Jeez.
I'd say, like I have a family that I would never put online, for example, because I'm like, okay, cool. If you're in my DMs telling me you're gonna lynch me because you don't like how the game came out, I don't know who that is and I don't know what you're capable of.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But I have the thick skin to be able to. I don't say I have the thick skin to be able to handle it, but I'm handling it so far.
You are a human. You have your days, basically.
Right, for sure. And so I don't want to say, oh, they don't know like what we have to deal with. I actually think they do know what they deal with. I think that's the point.
They don't care. They don't care.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't care. They just don't care.
I think that's the point. I think the point is I am creatively bankrupt. I can't make anything. And so my job is to hurt you, because that is like all I have. For some people, for some trolls, they're like, I just want to hurt you. Like, and so, but I mentioned before as well, there's a lot of game developers that just don't have a presence online like that. And I'd say it's a wise choice.
Yeah, you think that's for the better?
I actually think I would actually say there is very little upside to it. Obviously, there is some upside. I wouldn't be here talking to you. Otherwise, like, we connected through the fact that we're both like active online. Like, so I have a lot of connections that happen through my online presence that the people I was like, this is my friend now, that I'm made through my online connection. So I get benefits from that, but the downside outweighs the upside a lot, you know, like, but yeah, I also think people don't think developers care. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be sensitive that you can't critique what I make. You can go create, like I mentioned before, thousands of hours in the barbershop, you're going to be ready for life in a certain kind of way. Like, because they're going to find you, something about you, and rip the shit out of you. And that's just culturally something that we've had to deal with. Like, so I can handle it. If people are critiquing me, I'm like, or they're critiquing the product, I'm like, hey man, everyone's free. Everyone's free to have their opinion, right? You're free to have your opinion. Like, it's more so that when people say, oh, the developers are lazy, they don't care. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. That's probably the biggest misconception.
I've learned as I've gotten older, the biggest issue I've seen is a lot of people are not capable of thinking outside of themselves. And that's why they make those type of statements. Because like to them, they'll be like, oh, the balancing on a game is off. And they'll say that.
I wouldn't have made that mistake.
Yeah. So it's like that's what I noticed. And it's a lot of projection. So like, you might be right. It probably is best for like a lot of developers to just stay away from it, because like, I don't even think it's necessarily coming from a place of like malice. It's just like, they're probably just ignorant to a lot of it.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
and when it happens a lot, it's hard to control. When it happens a lot, you know, people do they literally look for whoever they can find, and it's usually like the community managers
who to find the first.
Yeah, and then for the community, I feel for the community managers of any high level development or publisher, because they get it. They're
the first line of defense. They literally
they really are. They really are. And it's like, I don't make the game. I'm supposed to be talking to you all, and and then now you're sending me death threats. Like, they're literally being the shield for a lot of you all who are in the background who developed the game. So it sucks.
That's one thing we actively preach against. Like, on our show is like, we'll criticize a game, but we always keep it gaming. We always say like, yo, y'all got to chill out on these devs on Twitter. Like, it's not that deep, bro. It's just
video games, dog.
Right.
Exactly.
You're acting like they killed your firstborn and sacrificed them to a god. Like, relax.
Oh my goodness.
And the thing is, the devs can handle the critique. It's just that it just doesn't make sense to go to them. Like, I can't change a game. I can change how a beard looks on one guy, but my overall power is quite limited.
So if I have an issue with Suicide Squad's security guide number 5, I can tweet you on Twitter and tell you to change it.
Not anymore. But
He said, I'm past that ego. I'm past security guard number 5.
Oh my goodness. With Suicide Squad around the corner, it's coming out this week on February 2nd. Let's move away from the negative. Let's talk positive. What was the coolest thing about working on the game? What was your favorite aspect?
Yeah, definitely the team, and I can't praise this guy enough. Like the character art director, he's the character and weapons art director, Albert Felu, and he was basically there since like Arkham City, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City days. He's been there the whole time working on the characters of the game, but he is the one that like super empowered me, like more than like I've ever had in my industry. Me saying, nah, he needs this lineup and he needs this haircut. He was the one that had the call, and he was just like, okay, yeah, cool. Even down to Deadshot's got a blue eye and a black eye. I just threw that in. I was just like, I thought it was cool, like to switch it up, and it kind of imitates the mask. And he was just like, yeah, it looks cool. Like he was my advocate. Even a perfect example is Hack. So the character Hack is the like the purple holographic character who, whenever you're doing your upgrades, she'll appear on the right hand side of the screen, and as you're like doing your upgrades, your bolt-ons, and customizing your character, she's the one that's effectively in charge of that stuff, and you see her in the game as well, and she helps in missions too. But I was part of the process with the lead, Andrew Matthews, who's like in charge of the casting of who we're going to kind of use as like the faces, what we're going for. And both him and the character art director were like, no, we want you in this process of helping us narrow down the face of this character as like. And so it's not just a case of just like, oh, find a black woman on the internet, just throw her.
Pick one.
She's the guide. It's like, no, like let's bring Dell in the conversation. Let's talk about this. Like, what sort of things should her representation be like? And even like deviating from the concept art. Like I managed to put like her natural hair texture in the holographic version. So if you're close to her in the game, you can see like, oh, she actually has afro hair, even when she's like in her.
Can I just say, you guys, I played the pre-alpha of it. That was one thing I was actually shocked by, because I actually walked up really close. I was like, oh snap, and I walked up close. The way that you guys did the holographic effect on top of like just her natural hair, where it wasn't all like just visual effect. There actually was like seemed to be like a hair model done with it and connect and talking with it. I know that's very difficult to do, especially with our type of hair. I know a lot of times technology has issues. Right. I appreciate you. I just want to say, I recognize that. I was like, because I do game dev stuff too, and I know a lot of times tools are very difficult because the people who make those tools don't really build them in the idea of like for like our type of hair texture and stuff like that. So you have to do a lot of behind the scenes like glitching and bugging to get it to do what you want it to do, so it seems natural and it looks right. So just to say, yeah, great job on that. Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, that was probably the best part. Like having the influence and be heard and be listened to. I just keep talking about like the people I worked with on that game, because I actually loved them. Like it was such a great experience. Like I haven't worked alongside them for a little while now, but that's just a great experience.
Cool.
It's good to hear.
That is awesome. Before we started recording, I had told you the majority of our audience is black and brown, and that's the reason I wanted to bring you on the show, because it's important for our people to see people who look like you doing what they want to do. So the way I want to end this conversation is I wanted to ask you, what's one piece of advice, or you can give several, to people who want to be in the gaming industry and do what you do?
I think the most important thing you need to do is take the process quite seriously. Like you have to, if you want to get into games or you want to take it seriously, like some people are just like, yeah, just make a game. And my counter argument is you should take your learning seriously. Like, you should be like, all right, cool, I'm interested in this. What mentoring or workshop or online course can I take that even like it should cost you some money to invest in, because you're investing in yourself, right? Like, you could go to a free barber, or you can, invest in one. It's going to have a different outcome.
You go to barber school.
Right.
Or you're someone that's been looking at YouTube tutorials.
Right? Yeah. Right. So I'd say that's probably my main advice. If you're interested, get really serious about understanding, take the time to understand what it is you're interested in, whether it's like, I'm interested in design, I'm interested in like 3D modeling or like environmental modeling, character modeling, drawing the concepts, you know, audio as well. That's another thing, audio. Like, we know a lot of people who are insane producers.
Jesus, yeah.
Insane producers.
Yeah.
And they're using those same programs to make your favorite games.
Yep.
Like, and it's like, you try and look at what your skill set is, what you naturally have an affinity for, and then find some sort of course or online course that you can to like bridge the gap to get your skill set, and you can find an avenue into the video games for sure.
That was dope. I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no problem.
And if people wanted to follow you and keep up with what's going on with you in your life and your career, where can they follow you at?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's probably a bad decision to follow me. At the Cartel Del, all one word.
Cool. I will leave it in the description box of the video if you guys want to follow him on social media and keep up with him. But other than that, we appreciate you for coming on the show, Mr. Del Walker. This was a great conversation, man, and I hope the audience enjoyed it. And we'll talk to you guys later.